Hello everyone, I'd like to invite you to my channel. Before we get started, I'd appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. It's a simple request, but it would mean a lot to me. Let me set the scene. There were 2 months left until graduation, and I was preparing to ask Tracy to be my date at the prom. I know some guys have been asking their girlfriends for 3 months before this date, but I didn't need to because Tracy was my Tracy Batson and I have been together since we were kids. Her family moved in next door when I was 5, and she was 4. We met a few days after they moved in. I was playing in the backyard when I noticed someone running towards me. I got up in time when she reached me. She was a short-haired blonde girl with green eyes and freckles all over her face. She reached out to me and hugged me tightly. She was a short, blonde girl with green eyes and freckles all over her face. She reached out to me and hugged me tightly. I let her do it. When we broke up, she knelt down next to me and started playing with my Tonka truck. That was all without fanfare. Best friends forever, Tracy and I didn't play together every day. Sometimes she wanted to play with the girls. Sometimes I want to play with the boys, but most of the time we played with Tracy. When she arrived, I knew she was a girl, but I never looked at her the same way I looked at other girls. Some girls lied, but not Tracy. We remained best friends. While other boys and girls were starting to pair up, Tracy and I were already a couple. Other couples went on dates, but Tracy and I just did things together. It wasn't a date, we just did what we always did. I was 14 and she was 13 when we first kissed. Like everything else for us, it was done easily and without fanfare. We were leaving the evening cinema. I put my arm around her waist. She clung to me and we kissed. It was nothing special for us, although I knew we both felt something. After that, we kissed many more times. Our parents seemed to take everything for granted. I was part of her family and she was part of mine. I could count on being if I misbehaved in her house, I was yelled at or spanked. The same thing happened to her if she misbehaved in mine. Our friends were also cool with our relationship. Maybe it seemed like we were always together, but we were just casual about it. No one tried to come between us. Outside the neighborhood, things were different. Tracy was different. Guys were always running after her. She was developed in all the right places. I was always worried that she would find someone she wanted more than me, but I never worried too much because we were us. She was mine and I was hers. That was the end of the story, at least that's what I thought. After classes ended, Tracy met me at the car and as we drove home through the car park, I looked away and asked where she wanted to go after graduation. There was a long silence, which I knew wasn't good. I pulled over as soon as I could find a free space and parked the car. I turned my full attention to Tracy, who was crying and looked like she'd just eaten a bag of lemons. I've already told Justin Morrow that I'm going to the prom with him. Tracy stammered, catching her breath for a second. She shook her head in disbelief, then he looked straight into her eyes. He told me last month that he thought it would be great to go with someone else, you know, another guy, another perspective. I don't get it. What's wrong with that? I thought my head was going to explode. What's going on, Tracy? Another perspective? You're kidding me. She burst into tears. I started reaching out to comfort her, but then I thought, we, Tracy? I shouted, you're my girlfriend. My girlfriend won't go to the prom with another guy just for let me give you a different perspective. Stevie, you and I have never dated anyone else. You're leaving for college in a few months, and we'll both have to date other people at least. Tracy, why didn't you wait until I left? That would have been the kind thing to do. I was so upset, I wasn't even listening. On the drive home from the show, I grumbled for 4 days. I didn't go to Tracy's house, and she didn't come to mine. Both parents were not born yesterday. I found out from Joyce that Tracy is going to the prom with Justin Morrow. Joyce cried when she said that to me. Stevie, do you want to add something? Mom asked at dinner on the 4th. Dad raised both eyebrows. My younger sister Ellie was fidgeting in her chair. Just you and Joyce can stop making wedding plans for us, he said. We're sorry, Stevie. It's really a pity. You know, if you need to talk, Dad, I said, trying to sound like I was joking, does anyone need 2 tickets to the prom? Justin Morrow was more of an acquaintance than I had no idea if my friend knew that Tracy and I were a couple. It didn't matter if Tracy really was mine, she would have told Justin about it. I walked around for a couple of weeks, feeling down, and then one day after school, I heard Allison Warrow giggling about something with several friends. Allison was the younger one. Alice was the sister of Laura Warrow, who lived across the street from me and hung out with a group of friends in the neighborhood. Alice and I had been friends for about as long as Tracy and I had, and she was probably Tracy's second best friend after me, at least until 3 weeks ago. Allison was a freshman at our high school. She was about 6 feet 3 inches, skinny as a rail with blonde hair. Alice is a great friend of mine. I've known her since I was 2 years old and we've always got on well. She was a little strange and crazy, but she was often my partner when we had chicken fights on the lawn or in the pool and she sat on my shoulders. It was so light that I could carry it with one hand, which gave me the opportunity to use my free hand. I had never seen Allison as anything more than just a skinny little sister, but I admit I always had a soft spot for my chicken wrestling partner. I already had tickets, so I made a somewhat awkward request. I called her away from the twins, another pair of 15-year-olds. I'm 25 years old. I asked her to be my date. Her alabaster face turned bright pink and she lowered her eyes to the ground. I knew I had caught her off guard. Shouldn't you ask my sister since you're not going with Tracy? You've always been one of her closest friends. She said, looking up at my face at the last second. No, I have to ask the worst girl I really want to go with and that's you. Even if there won't be chicken fights at the prom, I'm not asking you to replace Tracy. I'm asking you to be my friend. Can I ask my parents first? I'd like to go, but until I turn 16, my dad said I have to ask permission. I don't want Big Ed to be mad at me. I replied to Allison. Big Ed was a bear of a man, 1M, 90, 100 kilograms. I knew that the real force in the family was Allison's mother, Barbara, who was a fully Irish woman. Catholic, whom everyone read about in legends. God forbid the boy should touch even one of his daughters. Barbara would surely rip off both his ears and scratch out both his eyes. There was a phone call in the evening, but not to me. Barb called my mom's boss directly, and I heard Mom assure Barb in great detail that I would be a complete gentleman when Mom gives her word. That's how it happens, which was fine with me. The next morning, I didn't even have time. I got to my locker to find Laura in front of it, cursing. What the hell, Stevie? I'm a nobody. We've been friends forever. I've spent half my life with you. You're inviting my little sister to the prom. What happened? She practically shouted at me. I raised my hands in surrender until a few weeks ago, when I was sure I was going to the prom with Tracy. But I guess I was wrong. I said, after she figuratively kicked me in the balls, I wasn't. I decided to go to the prom, but only to have fun without getting attached. I like to laugh, and I think Allison is funny. We'll have a good time, and then I'll graduate and go to university. Laura let out a small scream and then inhaled about half the oxygen in the hallway while everyone was watching us. She looked at me intently and then snorted. I looked at everyone who was looking at me, shrugged my shoulders, and went to my first lesson of the day. I think I've lost 2 friends today. The graduation was as good as I could have hoped for. Allison looked amazing in her navy blue dress with her hair styled and made up for the first time. I never once had the desire to throw her over my shoulders for chicken fights, but I definitely had the desire to pull her closer to me for a slow dance, which I did. On the second dance, she clung to my body, and so we danced until the end of the evening. I saw her. I saw Tracy and Justin a few times during the evening. She looked great in a green dress that showed off her figure, and Justin looked good in a black suit. When I saw them, they seemed to be enjoying themselves. I didn't try to pay attention to Tracy and Justin because I was spending time with Allison. She was funny and a bit skinny. I thought that in the next year I almost wished I could stay to see if she would turn into a real heartbreaker. We went for a late breakfast at the local IHOP with a few other couples, then I drove us home. I parked in front of my house and led her across the street to the porch. I mustered up the courage and kissed her goodnight with a little tongue before she hugged me tighter and ran her tongue over mine. After that, we did it a second time until I heard movement outside the door and decided I should take the hint and walk home. The following Saturday morning after Tracy came over to my house as she had done for many years until 2 months ago. My mom and I looked at each other in surprise when Tracy came over to the couch in the family room and moved closer to me. She sat in silence for about a minute while we watched Premier League football and then whispered. She whispered in my ear that we needed to talk in the backyard. I protested, but I could see the look on my mom's face and I realized I had to follow Tracy outside. Don't you think this has been going on long enough? Stevie, graduation has been over for a week now and you still won't talk to me. As I told you, it was a one-time thing. I should mention that I've been seeing someone else, and so have you. I have to say, though, that your choice surprised me. You didn't make Laura happy. I wasn't trying to make Laura happy. I was trying to make myself happy. I grumbled, okay, you've made yourself happy. Now it's time to get back to normal. I'm back. I'm yours, and you're mine, at least until the next time you decide to take a break from me. I interrupted. Tracy looked confused. I have to say that I didn't enjoy the prom, but it's over now and we're back to being ourselves. Stevie, she said, never be like that again. I said you're done with us forever. Don't be like that, Stevie. Tracy replied, fighting back tears. I got up from my chair, went into the house, took the car keys and drove away. An hour later, after Tracy gave up and went home, my mom texted me. She said that she'd met Allison several times and that they'd always. We had fun, but we were both realistic. I had 4 years of college ahead of me and she had 3 years of high school. We agreed that it was better for us to go our separate ways, although we did not rule out casual dates in the summer when I would be at home after New Year's Eve. Tracy called me from school. It was her senior year of prom. She called to tell me that she was making amends for ruining my graduation and that I could invite her. I told her it was a generous offer, but I'm just not ready for it. I figured Justin might be free since they had a good time last year. Maybe they should repeat it. She quietly hung up the phone in the summer when I was at home. Tracy sometimes came to me and suggested we should be together again. She even hinted to both my parents that she and I should get back together. That also explains why I had to endure an hour her mother gave me a long lecture about how good we were together and that I shouldn't see the forest for the trees. Of course, because of our whole story with Tracy's mom, I was polite but I still couldn't give her an answer that would please her. As for Tracy's father, he couldn't look me in the eye. I think he agreed with my position but he didn't want to say it out loud. I knew Allison had her share of dates. She turned into a real stunning beauty when she finally got in shape. I went on dates too because I'm a pretty decent catch. I kept an eye on Allison and I knew she didn't have a steady boyfriend in the middle of senior year. So when I was at home for Christmas, I asked her if she wanted me to be with her for graduation. She smiled and said yes. Allison has matured a lot in the last 3 years. She's a real hot babe, but she's still the same cheerful character she always was. We had a great time at the prom and it got even better when we got to know each other better. I'd never been so hopeful for a result that I'd booked a hotel room, but I wasn't going to push Allison to do it. We started the evening as great friends and just like 3 years ago, Allison pressed her whole body against me every time we went out on the dance floor. Her lips tasted delicious, and we spent a lot of time kissing. Towards the end of the evening, I asked if she wanted to have some more fun with her friends or if she wanted to go to the hotel with me. She didn't look surprised or upset that I'd booked a room for us. We had a bottle of champagne and some strawberries in my room. We took our time getting into bed, kissing, joking, laughing and talking. I don't know how long we did this until we were in front of the bed, or I carefully began to take off her burgundy silk and lace dress. I figured Allison was an ordinary child, so I assumed she wasn't a virgin, but I didn't think she had too much experience in bed. We clung to each other quietly for a while before we started talking and laughing again. We got dressed and left, and I brought Allison home at 14:05. Allison and I were together for 15 minutes ahead of Big Ed's deadline for the night during the summer after her graduation. We went our separate ways again when she left for her freshman year of college in Iowa and I left for my senior year of college in Indiana. We kept in touch by email, and although we remained great friends, we both knew that we were moving in different directions. I was graduating from college in May, and she had 3 more years of study ahead of her. They say time is everything, and it seems that our time just didn't align. I have to give Tracy credit for her persistence. She kept up with what was going on, sending emails every so often, gently reminding me that she would drop everything in an instant if I just said the word. I politely reminded her that our paths had diverged at night and that we both had our own lives. I got a good job at a medium-sized accounting firm in Ohio and started studying for a master's degree, thinking that one day I would want to become a college professor. I got a job at a medium-sized accounting firm in Ohio and started studying for a master's degree, thinking that one day I would want to become a college professor. I know it sounds a bit strange, but I really enjoy communicating with people through mathematics while taking college courses. I communicated with many female students and my social life developed more in this direction than in any other until Molly entered my world and pulled me out of my meager existence. Molly was a divorced woman with a child who had recently started working in the audit department at my firm with long, bright orange hair, freckles everywhere and skin whiter than white. She was a perfect redhead. Everyone understood what I was talking about. Coffee and cake for a colleague in the break room. She took her cake a little before me, but when she turned to leave the table, the square of cake that she had just taken flew off her plate and in an attempt to stop it, she jerked her left hand to the side, creating splashes that landed on my chest. It hurt like hell. I remember that, but when I looked up, I was lost in those green eyes. Suddenly, I stopped feeling pain. It was only when another employee rushed to me with paper towels and started soaking that I felt the touch again and screamed in pain. Molly immediately started apologizing, and I went to the bathroom. An hour later, those mesmerizing green eyes appeared in my office with another piece of cake. 5 minutes later, I had an appointment for next Friday night. I must admit I was shocked. When I rang Molly's doorbell on Friday night, a teenager with red hair answered it. He must have been at least 16 years old, which means Molly was probably older than I had assumed. I wasn't put off by her age, but I was surprised when she admitted that she was 42 years old. She later said that she had been married for 16 years and divorced for 4 years. She looked great in what I would call a mom's version of the notorious little black dress, as it was a couple of centimeters above her knees. I tried not to draw attention to myself because I knew her son was watching me. Molly was raising a teenager, and despite her age, she seemed very knowledgeable about the world of youth. It took me about 5 minutes to adjust, but after that, everything seemed normal. We enjoyed a delicious meal and then went to a concert organized by the local Philharmonic. It wasn't the wildest date I've ever been on, but good enough that I realized I wanted to see her again. I decided to give it another go. I think it might have something to do with her age, but I was a little shy about making a move on Molly. She was beautiful, of course, but there was something about her that made me nervous. However, she clearly noticed that something was wrong, and on our 6th date, she brought up the subject. We had a bourbon and barbecue night, and then went to the country western dance club to dance a little. None of us had ever danced before, but we had a great time learning from veterans at the club. I held on. Molly was all over me all night. I could tell she was picking up on the vibe, but I was still wondering how to start when she put her hands behind my head and pulled me to her for a hot kiss. I know you're worried about my age, Stevie, but I'm not going to break the bus. We have to finish this night horizontally. Molly whispered, and an embarrassed smile spread across my face from ear to ear. I took her by the hand and led her out of the club. Molly might be the oldest woman I've ever slept with, but she was really full of energy and knew how to use her experience. About a year later, I got an invitation to the wedding in the mail, which made me slow down abruptly. It turned out that Allison had graduated from college about a year earlier and was getting married to a man she dated in her senior year. We stopped texting and I lost sight of her. She now lived in Illinois, but the wedding was to take place in New York, where her parents still lived. I took Molly with me, and I explained how everyone fits into this neighborhood holiday because that's exactly how it really was. My parents were there, as well as Big Ed, Barb and Laura. I also saw Drew Goldstein, who seemed like a nice enough guy. However, it took me a lot of reflection to be happy for Allison. I've never been able to get over my feelings for her, but it just wasn't meant to be. You have to move on. However, I probably didn't make either Allison or Drew happy when she first introduced Drew to me. A couple of days before the wedding, Drew and I had a chat. We had such a history, and I was probably as close to my older brother as she was to accepting me as such. I'm very happy for you, Drew, but listen to me and listen carefully. I said sharply, keeping a smile on my face. If you hurt her, I'll break your nose. Both Allison and Drew seemed slightly taken aback by my statement. Drew was smart enough to not understand when I shook his hand later. Laura said that Big Ed Tracy had obviously finally forgotten about me. She showed up with her husband, who had a big belly from pregnancy. He looked like he came out of a 60s biker movie. Neither Joyce nor Tim Batson looked very pleased. Tracy and I barely talked all weekend, but we were polite when we did talk. Molly and I never sought exclusivity. I knew she was dating others, while I preferred not to. We never discussed the others until a few months after Allison's wedding. At the wedding, Molly made an amazing Irish dinner and told me she had news. It turned out she was dating a nice guy a couple of years older than her. She was dating me almost all the time and he started talking about exclusivity. She decided she had to tell me this. I wasn't surprised and I didn't blame her if she wanted a more secure relationship. They probably had more in common. She started to show emotion and even seemed to apologize, but I stopped her. I told her, never apologize for doing what's right for you, baby. You've always been completely open and honest with me. If you want commitments and he can give them, then it's on my conscience. You are a beautiful woman and a beautiful soul. I hope everything works out great for you too. I really meant what I said. I got up from the table, kissed her very gently on the cheek, and a few years later, my mom told me that Allison had got divorced. I say it was a bit sad because I still had feelings for her, but it's always sad when someone's marriage breaks down. You marry someone thinking it's going to be a lifelong commitment, and when it doesn't work out, it's devastating. I felt sorry for her, but I didn't try to contact her because we weren't in touch. I was pretty surprised when I got a message from Al 6 months later. It said, "Are you still there?" I guess she wasn't sure if I still had the same phone number. I was pretty surprised to see who it was, but I didn't reply for about 3 days. In the end, I answered with a meaningless yes. It took another 3 days before I got a call one evening. "Do you have a few minutes for an old friend?" she asked. I really need to spend some time with a non-dash. I know we haven't spoken much over the years, but you've always been honest with me and made me laugh. It's been a long time since I've enjoyed a good laugh. Not being a beautiful woman, I didn't realize how hard it was for Allison in the years since our breakup in college. She was always the one who chose which events and social gatherings she went to. It must have been exhausting when she married Drew, the handsome son of a prominent lawyer from Illinois. It seemed like the good times would last forever because they both got good jobs at his father's company and enjoyed a very comfortable life in a new house. In the suburbs of Chicago, everything fell apart when she found out that Drew had been cheating on her for at least a year with the daughter of an old family friend. I agreed to go to Chicago for a long weekend to give her a shoulder to lean on. I know she sounded upset on the phone, but I was shocked when she appeared at the door of her she was living in an apartment in a rough area of the city. She looked like she hadn't eaten or showered in days, and her eyes seemed haunted. What happened to my little chicken wrestling girlfriend? I was sure my mouth opened and then she started crying. Most guys I know get completely lost in the presence of a crying woman. All I could do was hug Allison. I took her back to the apartment, and we spent the next 2 hours on the battered couch while she sobbed into my shirt and talked about her confusion and grief after learning about the betrayal. Allison kicked Drew out of the house, but then Drew's father intervened. Allison didn't read the prenuptial agreement she signed with Drew, and it was 9 months in. Later on, Allison was divorced and living in this apartment with no job and almost no life. Drew's father made sure that his human resources department destroyed Allison's chances of getting a good job in the area, so she ended up working at a dry cleaner's. Allison and I spoke a lot on Friday night and all day on Saturday as soon as I got to her apartment. We hugged, but after that the most physical thing we did was occasionally hold hands during a conversation. Everything was somehow wrong, and I was uneasy seeing Allison so broken. Given how her life was going, I needed to give her a clean exit, so I turned to the only man I knew who cared about Allison more than me. I explained I ran it by Big Ed, and he said he and Barb would be in Chicago the next morning to take Allison home to upstate New York. When I broke the news to Allison, she was pretty upset, but I knew it was the right move when I helped her pack her few belongings. She still called me all kinds of names. I'm 30. I'm a 25-year-old woman, and I don't need to be treated like I'm 5. On Monday, she said some pretty nice things to me while I was helping her pack. I kept in touch with Allison on a weekly basis through Big Ed and Barb. She was stubbornly refusing to talk to me, but my life went on. I'd been dating several women, including one for almost a year. I was already close to asking her an important question when she told me that she had met someone else. She said she wanted to date someone else and didn't want to cheat on me, so we needed to break up. I appreciated her honesty and returned my deposit for the engagement ring I'd bought about 6 months earlier. After that, I took a couple of days off and went to Chicago for the weekend. I did some homework and was waiting outside Drew Goldstein's Mercedes when he left work at 5. On Friday afternoon, I approached him in the car park. He didn't seem to remember me right away, but as soon as I took my seat, I saw a spark of recognition in his eyes. I didn't give him a chance to raise his hands, and I attacked him with all the strength I could muster. At 1m83 and 82 cog, I felt his nose explode and blood flew everywhere as he fell to the ground. I'd already warned you about what would happen if you hurt Allison. It seems you forgot, but I don't. I said quietly. Interestingly, although there were many people in the parking lot who saw me hitting Drew, none of them. He made a move to help him or stop me from leaving. I guess Drew wasn't very popular. Just a few hours later, I returned to Indiana, but I still expected the police to show up at my door because of my attack on Drew. I was surprised when it didn't happen. I was also surprised 2 weeks later when, later on, Allison called to say that someone had shaved Drew's nose a couple of weeks ago. She also said that I'd been threatening him for all these years, which made me look like a jerk. I don't know how to thank you. Oh, and Dad said he'd send you an 18-year-old bottle of Glenmorangie. I also had another idea for how Allison could thank me. I took a week off to help her with this. We spent most of that week together. By the time I left to return to Indiana, we had become a monogamous couple. However, we lived at a distance for about 6 months after that. Then she moved to live with me in Indiana. Big Ed and Barb didn't fully agree to such terms, but given our history, they gave us some leniency. However, it only lasted about a year because, 2 months later, Allison accepted my marriage proposal. 10 months after that, we got married. I love irony, so we tied the knot exactly 17 years after our first date, which was also my graduation. It may have taken us a while to be together, but as they say, the good things are worth waiting for. Allison and I just celebrated our 30th anniversary at a party hosted by our children, Eddie and Rosalie, and their spouses. It wasn't always perfect, but it was as close as I probably deserved, given how we get a Christmas card from Tracy every year. She has a 4th husband and 4 children who are already 25 years old. I didn't know that at the time, but someone upstairs was looking out for me.